Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome into the conversation. This episode is actually piggybacking on episode 92 and 94, which were all about scripting. I've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of feedback about those episodes, and I thought I would expand even more on the concept. Now, scripting is a law of attraction technique, a manifesting technique of speaking or writing what you want to happen as if it already has occurred. Now, this episode, even though it's piggybacking on those previous two, is a standalone episode. You don't have to listen to the other two, but I highly suggest it if you haven't already done so. The topic of this episode is speaking into existence. Speaking about a future, speaking about the things you want to happen as if they have already occurred, and imbuing it with the emotion of satisfaction that, yes, it has occurred. I just love the way Neville Goddard put it. It is assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, in this episode, I'm also going to talk about some other research or some other outside influences that support this whole idea of speaking into existence. We're also going to touch upon thought forms, egregores, or PK manifestations, poltergeists, and mass consciousness. Now, that sounds like a lot, and some of those I'm just going to touch upon, but they all kind of interweave and are part of this tapestry of speaking into existence. And I guess before we go too much further, I'll clarify a couple terms here, make them more distinct in your understanding. The first is thought form. Now, a thought form is considered to be an energetic manifestation of collective thinking, collective thoughts, ideas, or emotions of one person or a group of people. And this plays into mass consciousness, or a field of consciousness that imbues a place or a group of people. And I know some of you have been traveling, sometimes all your life. Some of you haven't gotten that far away from home. But if you've been to different places in your environment, in your locale, in the region, or the world, you've experienced the feeling or that a particular place has a feeling, has an attitude. And what you're picking up on is the collective thought form of the people that are active in energizing that place. And the supporting idea around this is that thoughts are things. Every thought is an energetic manifestation. And while once upon a time that was considered kind of an airy-fairy idea, if you look at magnetic resonant imaging, or MRIs, electroencephalograms, and polygraphs, thoughts have a manifestation in the world. They can be picked up energetically and perceived either on a computer screen or in some other fashion. And if you investigate research at the HeartMath Institute, they have found that magnetic energy emanating from the heart can extend between 3 and 28 feet in front of your body. The more aligned and the more coherent your thoughts are in alignment with your emotions, the greater your magnetic field. In another area of scientific research, they have found that cells just don't communicate biochemically or through your nervous system. They also interpret or communicate with each other through photons, little packets of energy. So in summation, every thought is an energetic manifestation. And when we draw a line to quantum physics, energy cannot be destroyed nor created. So when we create a thought form or a thought energy, that thought remains alive until it's transmuted or transformed. And in the context of law of attraction, like attracts like. So thoughts of a similar vibration begin to coalesce or attract to each other and create momentum. They become a thought form, or a collection of thoughts, a body of thoughts, a body of information, or in computing terms, a cloud server, which you can access if you're in a similar or in alignment with a similar vibration of that server. So for instance, if you were to think thoughts of fear or defeat or worry, you actually begin attracting the other thoughts that have ever been thunk or thought about fear, worry, and defeat. On the flip side of that, if you begin entertaining success and abundance, you start tapping into every other thought, every other vibration, every other emotion that has been generated around thoughts of abundance and success. That is why people have said, success begets success. And in other words, this is how momentum is created, because once you start thinking a thought and imbuing it with emotion, you become an attractor for like thoughts. You are an open receiver for that thought form or that field of consciousness. And this is why, I don't know if I specifically said it, but I pointed to it. But in the last episode when I talked about you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought, is because once you start thinking it, you become an attractor for like thoughts and circumstances that are in alignment with that negative thinking. And sometimes we think we're just being self-indulgent, or we're being pity, or we want to complain a little bit. Well, you have to take a look at that. That never really pans out to your benefit in the long run. And while, yes, I don't want you to ignore those feelings, you can state it and just address it once. Acknowledge it. Yes, I feel defeated. Or, yes, I feel less than amazing. But don't worry, I'll get better. And then you start focusing on what you do want to attract, and you acknowledge the circumstances that are there, and then you move into what you want to create. So that kind of fleshes out the idea of thought forms. Now, I did mention egregores or PK manifestations, and that's the idea that an entity, a non-physical entity, can be created based on a focus of attention, thought, and belief. Some examples of egregores could be Satan, because Satan is never really described in the Bible. Yet there's this image of what the devil or Satan looks like based on the descriptions, thought, and attention from the Catholic Church. And you also have to look at other Christian sects and how they talk about the devil or being influenced by Satan, tempted by Satan. When that is their focus, you cannot not think about it. That becomes a manifestation in and of itself. So one of the greatest propagators of the devil, of Satan, of that energy, that evil energy, is the Christian religion. That fear could be said to actually fuel evil, fuel that whole side of the spectrum. Because as a human being, you cannot entertain two opposing thoughts simultaneously. And that is why the thought or your focus, your current focus of the moment, is your point of attraction. Another egregore could be said to be the angels or the watchers. About 3 years ago, I had a young man approach me after one of my live presentations, and he wanted to know how to get rid of a manifestation, a poltergeist. And I asked him, how do you know that you have one? He said, because I created it. And he went on to tell me that he had a roommate that didn't really believe in the spiritual, and as a prank, he put thought and meditation into creating a non-entity, a prankster. And lo and behold, things started happening, mostly to his roommate, to where his roommate had to say, oh, there's something here. Drawers began opening by themselves, cupboard doors began opening, lights would flicker on and off. And this young man told me, in the beginning, it was just kind of a fun prank, a little experiment. But he said this thing is starting to take on almost a life of its own. And so we talked about it, and his roommate was feeding it fear, feeding it. And the more they talked about it together, they were expanding the energy around this entity. Because frankly, this young man admitted to me when he was talking with his roommate about this spirit, quote unquote, that he never admitted that I created it. I did it. He would feed in to the fear and like, I wonder what it's all about. I wonder what it wants. And so I said to this young man, since you created it, you can transform it. Start talking to it with feelings of love and respect, and talk about how amazing it is that he brings this entity, and you can give it a name if you want, brings in love and light into the space, that it just creates this incredible lightness of being. And talk about how much you love that today, as if it's already happened, and speak it into existence from a positive sense, from a positive influence sense. And also, when you meditate, project love and light into the space. Imagine that this entity is being transformed, absorbing the love and light, and then becoming a magnifier for this positive expression, not only in your environment, not only in your apartment, but your building, and that it's reaching out in all directions. It's raising the vibration of the planet. And this young man said he would do that, and then I had him agree, get back with me when you feel as if it's made a difference. Well, he texted me not only a week later and said, the entire thing seems to be transformed. It feels completely different in the space. My roommate is even talking about how amazing it feels to be at home. And before, he was finding reasons to not be home. Now, these examples of PK manifestations or psychokinetic manifestations can be amplified for those of you that are already tuned in psychically, or your gifts are open, or you're very empathetic, or meaning that you respond to the world very emotionally charged. So this is why you have to be very careful about the energy that you put out or that you broadcast, especially those of you that are in your teen years, because a lot of time there's a lot of conflict, inner turmoil going on. Who am I? Who am I for the world? No one listens to me. I don't matter. And you start attracting or can create an entity that is aligned with that thinking, because that energy coalesces around you and manifests in your environment. And while this leads or potentially creates another podcast down the road talking about attachments and negative entities, quote unquote, for the sake of this conversation, let's just say that when you are thinking a particular way, you are an attractor for energies of a similar vibration. So if you have or have experienced that you have less than desirable energies around you, you can banish them just by your word, declaring that they are not welcomed here, and start focusing on love and light. Focus on the feelings of joy. Focus on the feelings of love, and have that feeling surround you. Gratitude is another practice, a way of focusing that positive, joyful energy, that appreciative love. And this circles back to a foundational belief or a foundational tenet in the law of attraction. And that is that you cannot have a reality asserted upon you. You have to be in the receiving mode. So you have to be a vibrational match for whatever shows up on some level. Now, many of you are not doing this consciously. And that's why there's such things as this podcast. You take a look at what are you currently attracting, and take a look at what are your current thoughts, and ask the question, how am I attracting this? And again, don't start focusing on what you don't want, because you cannot not think of something. Start focusing on the circumstances that you want to attract. And in that vein, in that context, or in that idea, my wife and I just recently did a thing. This podcast is just coming out after the Pisces new moon here in March 2022. And what we did is we opened up a bottle of wine together and we celebrated. We celebrated the future that we're ushering in. But when we talked about it as if it already happened. I love the fact that we're on this expanded property in this amazing house. It feels like a home, and we described the house and we described the setting, how you look out the windows and it just takes your breath away because it's a bueno vista, a beautiful view. And we riffed back and forth for over 30 minutes about everything that we loved and appreciated about our future life. But when we were talking about it, we talked about it as if it already happened. We were excited about it. We talked about how much we loved it and how much joy it was bringing our life and how appreciative we were. And it felt amazing. And occasionally, a circumstance that was less than desirable would pop up and we would address it. I would use this process called I Remember When. I remember when we hadn't yet figured this out, and it felt like a struggle. It's just amazing how today that is like a faint memory. I can hardly even bring it to my mind because things are so good today. And we would talk about it in favorable, enlightening ways until it felt amazing, to where that little, struggling feeling was gone. It was dissipated. You see, we manifest through our speaking. Not just the words we say, but the emotion that we imbue those words with, the images that are created from our word stories. And if you have circumstances that are less than desirable, less than amazing, less than what you want, and that's what you keep talking about, focusing on what's not in your bank account, focusing on the circumstances that are not present in your life, start talking about the way you want it to be. If you have a story that, for instance, I'm no good with money, start saying, I'm so happy and pleased that I've figured out this money game, and I'm getting better all the time. Attracting money is so easy. I can't believe once upon a time I thought it was hard. It is such an easy thing to do to bring money into my life. It seems like child's play. And keep telling the new story over and over again. When something from the past or something from the quote-unquote present, and understand that whatever you're aware of in the present is just a manifestation of past thinking. So whatever has come up in the past, let it be in the past and start focusing on now. What are you creating now? Imbuing it with the positive power, the positive energy, and allow that to flow through you. And that becomes the attractor. That becomes the energetic focus that you start tapping into other thought forms that are aligned with that powerful vibration. That new story also becomes a personal broadcast that other people that can assist you, that want to assist you, to line up and synchronistically meet you on your road to success, what you're creating. They're waiting in the wings to assist you. I've told stories of how people have been praying for someone to show up, and I was just out and about, and I showed up to assist them. Not that I'm the only one, but I've told stories about how I was there to find people that were stranded on the road. Just recently, I talked about the young couple. Out and about, I was out way too late, and I was pulled into a gas station in order to get my bearings because I was in from unfamiliar territory. And this young man comes up to me just before a big freeze here in Texas. And when I say a big freeze, it was supposed to be 17 degrees the next day. And him and his girlfriend were living in a tent. And he needed propane to fuel their heater. And he asked me if I had $1 and some change, which I didn't. But he asked me if I had some dollar and some change because he had $19 and the propane was $20 plus some tax. And frankly, because of the context of his question and how urgent it was, I immediately didn't. I searched my car. I didn't have any money. Then I realized that I had some money tucked in my pocket. But had I really been thinking, I could have just bought the propane for them. But 2 minutes to 12, I realized I had this money. I fished it out of my pocket. I ran it over to them, and then they ran to the store and paid for the propane. And then they went on their way, and I just lost track of them. So my point is that these thoughts that you broadcast become magnetic, and then other people that are in alignment or other people that can help you, they show up in response to the vibration that you're putting out. And something that's important to realize, that when you experience synchronicity, when you experience that support from unseen places, it's useful to say, but of course. Okay, this is the end of part 1. I did split this longer podcast into 2 parts to make it more digestible. So pick up part 2, where we continue the story, continue the conversation in episode 97. And if you haven't yet done so, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss anything. So until next time, this is Daniel Denovi urging you to follow your bliss. Live your life from inner signals, from be inner directed, living the epic adventure.